Hello and welcome to What the Tech from Boast AI, where we talk with some of the brilliant minds behind new and exciting tech initiatives to learn what it takes to tackle technological uncertainty and eventually change the world. Today, I am thrilled to welcome to the show Stephen Forth, co-founder and CEO of Ibbaka. At Ibbaka, their focus is on helping SaaS companies set pricing models that align with the true value they deliver, helping drive increased revenue, profitability, and customer retention in the process. Through both the Ibbaka Valio Platform and through consulting that is informed by research and data, Stephen and his team are helping SaaS companies achieve greatness in the subscription economy. And few people are more qualified than Stephen to help steer this effort. His journey as an entrepreneur has seen him lead innovative teams in both the US and Canada, while he's consulted on the go-to-market strategies, value management, and pricing for a wide breadth of existing products and services. He's even been identified as one of the leading experts in B2B pricing by Openview, combining design and decision-making frameworks with value management and pricing strategy to help SaaS businesses grow. It's an impressive and exciting mission, and I couldn't be happier to have Stephen join us to discuss his takes on the innovation economy, what it takes to succeed in today's market, and what's in store for Ibbaka in 2024. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Stephen.
I'm delighted to be here.
Oh, we're so happy to have you. So I know I gave a little bit of background, but I'd love to hear from you for starters. Tell us what got you into the entrepreneurship game in the first place, where you're based and why, and just a little bit about yourself for our audience.
Yeah, so I think like many people who create companies, I had to create a company because I'm basically unemployable. And I started, as an individual guy who was building mathematical models of various different economic systems. And then I realized that I needed to work with other people and in order to really extend the impact that I could have. And I remember I was walking, up a hill in Vancouver, where I live, when I had almost like an epiphany, and I realized, what I really want to do is not just work by myself with this complex mathematics. What I really want to do is to work with other people so that we can really build teams and build community and impact the world that way. And it's a change in mindset, but I think it's a change in mindset that many entrepreneurs have. You start being unable to work well in a structured corporate environment, and you end up building an environment, hopefully, that has the kind of structures that allow people to really thrive and succeed. And the most important thing for me is to create value for the people I work with and create careers for them. So many young people have started their careers at one or another of the companies that we've started. And gone on to senior executive positions at places like Microsoft and IBM and Google. And that's tremendously satisfying. But there's also a tight group of us that have gone from company to company, and we've created a number of companies together. So our Chief Operations Officer, COO, Karen Chiang, our Chief Technology Officer, Lee Iverson, and a number of other people on the team we're used to working together to drive innovation. And, that's tremendously satisfying.
I love that. You actually are echoing something I hear very often on this podcast, especially with founders and entrepreneurs. Sometimes they start off in a position where they're in that corporate space and they almost feel like they've retired early. It feels like you are just a cog in the machine. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs don't like that. They like being able to dig deep into those projects. They like being able to work on those mathematical models. I was very happy to hear that point about that team you've had that's kind of come with you from company to company and have worked together with you on driving innovation with that kind of shared mission. How did that team come together?
So in a couple of different ways. So back in the 1990s, I was running a media company, DNA Media, and we did a lot of international work. So we did a lot of work both in Japan and Korea and also in Europe. And Karen Chiang had recently returned from China, where she had been working in internet startups, was looking for a job, and I hired her as my executive assistant, which I think she thought was below her. But she went on to, within less than 2 years to become our vice president for internet services. And the internet was, still relatively early. This is 94, 95, around there. So Karen had left to go work for Hewlett Packard. In the late 90s, we spun out a knowledge management software company, a platform called ThoughtShare. And I went and convinced her to leave the massive safe nest of Hewlett Packard to jump back into the startup world. Then the same thing happened a decade or so later, maybe a bit longer than that, when we started Ibbaka. She had been running a local systems integration company, and I convinced her to leave that and help us find Ibbaka. Lee is a bit of a different story. Lee is an artificial intelligence guy. He had been working for SRI in California, Stanford Research Institute, and his wife got a job at the University of British Columbia. So he moved up to Vancouver with her, joined the faculty at UBC at the University of British Columbia, and he hated being a professor in academia. So we had a knowledge management community of practice in Vancouver, and Lee, Karen, and I, and a couple of other people developed a formal model for doing knowledge management. And that's how we first met Lee. And then when we started at Ibbaka, he came in as our CTO, because we knew, even when we started, that artificial intelligence was going to be central to what we're going to need to do, and central to our vision and mission.
Amazing foresight, especially because you hear AI in everything today, whether or not it's true AI or whether or not your definition of AI melds with what the standard is business to business. It is really good to have that expertise in-house and close. I also love too that these are networks that have stuck with you for a long time. These aren't people who are just one time, all right, now you're off to your HP job or you're off to your another big corporate job. They can, if they feel dissatisfied with where their path has gone, come back to you for at least advice, if not another opportunity to get back into that kind of nitty gritty and working hard that I think a lot of founders who listen to this show really strive for in their careers. So you've talked about this a little bit, and I'd love to dig in a little bit more, but what are you passionate about? I know that you talked about those mathematical models that you worked on earlier in your career. You wanted to get some more like-minded folks to work with and bump elbows with in the entrepreneurial space, but what brought you from there to what you're doing at Ibbaka today, and how has that influenced what the mission is at Ibbaka?
So I'm going to give you two answers to that. One is going to sound abstract, but it really is central to how we think. And what I'm really passionate about is building connections and understanding connections. So just going back to your previous question, we invest in long-term relationships with our customers and with people. So we have people at companies that have moved into other companies and then brought us in. We have customers that went away for a year and a half or so and then came back. And we have people who have left our little group for a couple of years and then again rejoined down the road. But it's not just connections with people, it's also connections with knowledge. So understanding how ideas connect is sort of central to my being. I've spent a lot of time working on the types of technical systems that allow one to understand and manage connections, which is why the whole generative AI space is so interesting. I've actually been building my own private generative AI to see how different ideas that I work with are connected together. And there's some great tools that have been emerging over the last year or so that allow you to look into large language models and see the connections. And that's a sort of underutilized use of Gen AI that I think we're going to see more and more of. The other part of what I do is because when I lived in Japan for a decade, and I moved back to Vancouver in 1989, and there was really no company that I wanted to work at in Vancouver in 1989. So I became committed to building an innovation community and an innovation economy, at first locally, but also one that extends into other communities. And if you're going to have innovation, innovation can't be random. Innovation has to be about creating value and creating economic value. And if you don't understand the economic value that your innovations are creating, they are going to fail. There are some side cases where there is such enormous community value that an innovation can take hold. But for most of us, you have to be creating economic value. In 2006, I had sold a company and was on the bench, so to speak, and I was headhunted to go to Boston to work for a company called Monitor Group. Yeah, I know you're based in Boston. Great. Yeah, I think my favorite city in the US, along with New Orleans and New York. But anyway, I digress. Anyway, I went to Boston to join Monitor Group to take their various frameworks online and turn them into software. And the thing I got excited about, much to my surprise, was pricing. Monitor had bought a company, the Strategic Pricing Group, which was led by a gentleman, Tom Nagel, who is really the godfather of pricing. He wrote the book, The Strategy and Tactics of Pricing, which is the book everyone in business should read if they want to understand, how this stuff works. And I realized, wow, if I had understood pricing earlier in my career, I would be a much wealthier guy. But as I said, working in large organizations is really not my thing. So in 2009, I got together with some other people that were working with me, and we took out the part of Monitor Group that did pricing software that we had built. We left Monitor and stood up a company called Leverage Point in Boston. I think they're based in Somerville now. And we created this initial category of value-based pricing software based on the work we'd been doing at Monitor. We spun it out, stood it up as an independent company. And Leverage Point is still operating and is still quite successful in the value modeling space. Much as I like Boston, I'm a West Coast guy. I like the combination of cultures, mountains, ocean that one has in Vancouver. And also, I had a brand new baby granddaughter. So my wife and I decided to move back to Vancouver. So I can say I'm a true Vancouver person, not because I was born here and grew up here, but because I chose to live here twice. So I'm committed to this place.
Yeah.
Uh,
And again, you built that innovation community there that it's beyond just the borders of Vancouver too. But I mean, I also have a space heater going here right now, so I do not fault you at all for leaving Boston behind for Vancouver, where it's a little more regulated, temperature-wise at least. But that is
yeah,
awesome to hear, Stephen.
I do miss the MIT Press bookstore.
Oh, I should have worn my MIT Press t-shirt for this. I'm actually going to a networking event in Cambridge this afternoon, so I will be stopping by the new bookstore that they actually opened on my trip, but I digress. I'm always happy to hear when we have folks who at least have a connection to Boston because, as you know, Boast is originally a Vancouver-based company as well. And in a similar vein, too, so much of our team is still there. And while we have expanded into new markets, the real nexus of our organization is still in Vancouver. So again, I think that we are a Vancouver born and bred innovation company that has benefited a lot from kind of the ecosystem that you have been a key part of building. So, I mean, much love to Vancouver. I don't get out there nearly enough, but I'm hoping in the new year that I will be just to get a taste of all of that cool stuff. It's very exciting to be out there today. So it's really funny to hear that this community wasn't necessarily geared towards innovation a few decades back or just a few years ago. So that's so cool. I do want to dig in a little bit. Now, value pricing, and again, value-based pricing. For SaaS specifically, I understand that's the big mission at Ibbaka. Could we dive in a little bit about how do teams value their solutions in the current market, especially bearing in mind things like nascent technologies like AI, which isn't really nascent, but it's definitely buzzing right now. And also the larger considerations around funding. I mean, all you hear today is that inflation's happening, interest remains high, even if they're not pushing the rates necessarily today, but just relying on loans and kind of lending to kind of get your runway is not going to be necessarily an easy path today. So how do you value price your solution in that context?
Yeah, so those lots of big questions wrapped in there. I think the first thing to realize is that your solution has an undifferentiated or commoditized part to it, and hopefully it has a highly differentiated part. And the market sets the price for the commoditized part. So there's a bunch of standard things that you do that your competitors also do. They're not differentiated. They're necessary. Sometimes we hear them referred to as table stakes, but the market sets the price for the commoditized part of what you do. However, if you are an innovation-driven company, you're creating value in ways that your competitors do not. And this needs to be the mission of the CEO and the technology and product leaders, is always be asking, how can we create more value for our customers in ways that our competitors do not today? AI is going to be a big part of the answer to that. And we'll come back to that in a moment. Because the other thing to remember is that anything that is differentiated today will be commoditized tomorrow. Innovation is never done. Everything that you are innovating on today and creating value that allows you to win higher prices is going to be commoditized tomorrow. And I don't care if you have patent protection or not. There are always ways to engineer around patents. So that's the reason that a company like Boast is so important, because it can help find you ways to fund that ongoing innovation that is absolutely necessary if you're going to survive. And the other thing about commoditized offers is that they come under price pressure. Commoditized offers, the price tends to drift down, and eventually the lowest cost provider wins. Now, I don't know about you, but I do not particularly want to be working for the lowest cost provider in a knowledge business because that means low salaries.
I was going to say, I want to get paid at the end of the day.
Yeah. So innovation is critical, but you can't innovate though if you can't also capture the value of your innovation. And that's where value-based pricing comes in. In value-based pricing, you start by building a value model, which is a formal, quantifiable model of how much value you are creating for customers. And this is the big difference, I mean, between what Ibbaka does and what many of our competitors do. We start by building a value model, and our software platform hosts that value model so that it can be used to generate sales content, pricing content, integrate with CRM systems and configure price quote systems, and really organize the company around how it is creating, communicating, delivering, and really important, documenting value for its customers. And if you're doing all those things, the pricing part is actually pretty easy. What we generally do is we derive the price model from the value model. I do a lot of the pricing models still. We have some younger people that are coming up that have great expertise in designing pricing. But the truth is that if you have a good value model, designing pricing is not that difficult.
I just want to drive a fine point under something you said there too, that the price is derived from value. I think when a lot of people hear pricing models, they get very cynical about it. But if you're putting that value front and center, and if you're taking that considered approach, does in building that model first to truly understand what you are giving so you can really quantify what you want to get back. I also love too that there's a lot of simpatico, I feel like, in our platforms. We take a very similar approach at Boast, where it's all about getting that source of truth on the platform immediately. Integrate those key sources of data into one spot so you can really take a holistic look at what the true state of the state is. So in your case, that is the value that you're deriving. In our state is, it's how you're organizing your R&D. I mean, the tail can't wag the dog, but you do need that R&D house in order. You need that funding in place to actually have that solution and to build that MVP and then actually productionalize it and then understand the value of that solution. So I almost see these as like paired steps in the journey for entrepreneurs or anyone who's building a product. Start with getting that funding in place to actually build that solution, but don't lose sight of these have to serve customers. These have to deliver value. These have to actually drive outcomes for people who are going to use it. Get that value model in place and work from that as your starting point to actually price your solution. So I love hearing all about that. I'd love to know a little bit too. You've worked with Boast in the past. Could you just give me a taste about what your experience has been working with Boast, but also what you look for in partners, whether that's in building the product or even just helping the folks that you work with get their innovation going?
So Boast has been absolutely great to work with. Once upon a time, I used to think that we could do all of this ourselves in-house, and then just work with our accountant to, file claims. But Boast has proven me wrong. The most valuable time that we have at Ibbaka is the time of our senior technology people. And the less time that they need to spend working on, claims and things like that, the more time they can spend innovating. And that's hugely important to us because, time is the scarce resource. They're not making more of it. The older I get, the more pressure I feel that I need to learn faster, and share what I'm learning more effectively. And Boast has really helped us do that, and has had a very good effect on forcing us to think about how we document things. Now, I'm sure that the people we work with at Boast are rolling their eyes because I don't think Ibbaka is good at this yet. But by working with Boast, we are going to get good at it over the next couple of years.
Exactly. I was just going to say that's part of what we want to help businesses do too, because I think there's a lot of understanding and knowledge that hasn't been shared necessarily about how to set up your R&D operation for success, but also with an eye towards that capital structure and making sure that you're tapping into the non-dilutive funding and stretching those dollars further.
Mhm.
It seems like, to overuse the terms, table stakes from where I'm sitting today. But it's amazing that a lot of people just don't even know that, okay, it's not just about the programs that are out there. It's about structuring your workflows in a way that is productive, in a way that documents all that key data that's going to be value when you're putting together a claim. But also shining a light on things that you might not even be aware you could capitalize on.
Mhm.
That's something that with our platform, we're hoping we can get our customers in the habit of doing a little better. So I'm happy to hear that it's starting to rub off, but I love hearing that our best practices are starting to trickle down also through those customers who we have delivered for already. So we want to be more than just your shred provider, more than just your source for R&D tax credits. We really want to make sure that you're optimizing your product roadmap in every dimension that we can. So hearing that we've helped you guys get on that path and tap into that funding is incredible. But also, again, the processes. That's
Yeah.
where I think we really, really want to nail down. And again, it all leads up to the value creation too. I think we love working with partners like Ibbaka because, again, it's part of that tech ecosystem. We're all a community here, and we all don't want to go back to, again, that feeling of semi-retirement that happens in the corporate world. We want to drive change, we want to drive new solutions, and we want to have fun going to work. And I think for entrepreneurs, sometimes, sure, it seems a little nerdy or it might seem a little in the weeds, but I mean, now I'm excited about pricing models and pricing structures and learning more. So I'm going to be going on a deep dive after this call again into the Ibbaka resource library, just because it's so much more than what I thought it was. And it really makes you think different about what it goes into starting a business too. So that is fantastic. Now, what's your take on the current state of startups? And maybe what's some sage advice you share to SaaS founders in particular within this community? Because I know that's a sweet spot for you folks over at Ibbaka.
Mark Andreessen has a famous quote, that software is eating the world. I think he said that back in 2011 or 2012. Today, AI is eating software. And if you are not investing in AI-driven innovation, your company will be irrelevant within 5 years or highly commoditized. I've seen some speculation that, oh, we're over-indexing AI. It's a boom. It's on the hype wave, but I don't think that's true. This is the real deal. AI is not new. It's been around in various forms for many decades. The Toronto-Montreal transformation of AI into deep learning models, Geoffrey Hinton, a fundamental shift in how human technical structures work. This is more important than the internet, and it's going to be bigger than the internet. So, we all have to be thinking about how we will leverage AI to drive more differentiation into our own solutions. The other thing that this is going to change, I believe, is that AI is different from conventional database server style SaaS architectures. in that it is going to cost more to operate. So operating margins are going to go down. You can say, well, then why would we invest in AI if it's going to drive operating margins down? And the answer is because if you don't, you will be going out of business. So we are going to have to learn how to build and operate companies on lower margins than the sort of 90% that we're used to. Where that's going to settle, I don't know. It could be 70%, it could be 50%. I would be shocked if it's below 50%. So, these are still going to be relatively high margin businesses, but they're not going to be as high as they used to be. We need to start thinking about how we finance, value, operate, businesses that have higher operating costs because of the computational costs of AI on an ongoing basis. And that's a big change, and it's a change that I don't think most of us have processed yet. Oh, and the other thing that I think that people are aware of is that annual recurring revenue has been the valuation driver for SaaS for the last as long as I can remember, actually, but certainly for the last 5 years. That's changing, and net revenue retention and gross margin are also being looked at more carefully by investors. And valuation models are starting to shift to factor in gross margin and net recurring revenue. And that also changes the way we think about operating our businesses. And with that in mind, Ibbaka is going to be launching a new module for net revenue retention analysis and prediction later this year. So that's one of the major pieces of innovation that Boast has helped us with, that we will be bringing to market later this year, that I think will have a big impact on how people see their SaaS businesses.
That is fantastic. And I want to pull back to, I love the points that you were making about AI to drive differentiation too. Let's actually find some meaningful use cases to drive differentiation with AI. I think that's something I just really wanted to drive back, because I don't know if founders are taking that to heart in every dimension, and I think that they really should be. So it's not necessarily about adding AI to the name of your product. It's about really using it to drive that unique differentiation, because again, that funnels up to the value that you're delivering. That's going to influence how you're pricing your product at the end of the day. And that's going to be your revenue down the line. And that's how you get paid. And again, not to bring it back to getting paid and being a little cynical on that front, but I mean, you got to make money to drive innovation at the end of the day. So, yeah.
Yeah, we refer to this as the value cycle at Ibbaka. So you start by creating value, then you need to communicate, deliver it, document it, but then you have to capture part of the value that you're creating so that you can go on and continue to innovate.
Absolutely. Capture that value that you're creating so you can go on to continue innovating. That is fantastic. Stephen, I cannot thank you enough for joining me today. Again, folks, visit Ibbaka, check out their resource library, and also follow Stephen on LinkedIn. He has lots of knowledge to share, and I can't thank you enough for joining us today, Stephen.
I have more to learn than I have to share.
Thank you so much.